Are indies crushing AAA? Is that the future? Is that what we're seeing? Has it already happened? Asmon's going to react. Veteran Joystick seems to think it's true. I'll be reacting to both. Let's dig into it.
So, indie games recently have been popping off. And I mean, like, really, really, really popping off. Like, they've been doing extremely well. I'm actually even kind of shocked at how well a lot of these indie games are doing. And why are indie games performing so well? I will tell you why. It's because they are actually video games. Like, if I go right now and I look at SteamDB, how many of these video games are indie games? Banana is unfortunately an indie game, and I think Repo is an indie game. And it looks like Megabonk is no longer on the list, but Megabonk was also an indie game, and so was Ball Pit very recently.
Right. In the last few weeks, 6 indie games have been released.
I love this game, by the way. This is, like, I've been playing this game a lot off stream. This game is so good.
By teams of 5 people or less, and combined they've sold over 8
this is
million
RV area.
copies. While studios with hundreds of developers, hundreds of millions in the bank are shutting down, these absolute lunatics are winning, and it's not even close. 2025 has proved something. When you make something genuinely new, genuinely weird, genuinely passionate, we notice. 6 games, all completely unique, all from tiny teams willing to try something no one else would, and they're being rewarded for it, because innovation beats budget, risk beats formula, fun beats focus groups.
Well, look at Napoleon Dynamite, for example. I mean, think about how successful that movie was, and that shit was filmed with a budget of, like, I'd say like $16, right? I mean, that's it. A lot of video games, you don't really need to do a whole lot of crazy stuff. All you really need to do is just make something that's fun to play, and you don't need $1 billion for that.
Yes, it's insanely difficult. So most of the games he's showing here in this video, in this one, actually most of them I think are indies. There's some where, like, you could really debate if Escape from Duckov qualifies, but they're successful games. They're really good indie games. They're not in the top 10, 20 on Steam for the most part. Some of them were up there. I think Escape from Duckov did really well. Are We There Yet got pretty high. But they're successful. They're certainly successful as indie games. And again, Megabonk as well. Like, did super, super well, got up there. Didn't sell anywhere near what you would need to sell to be a successful AAA product, and they don't have to. They play by a different set of rules. They have a different budget. They have different numbers of developers, different timelines, different pressures and expectations. Veteran Joystick said something earlier to the effect of, hey, you need to, that risk beats formula, and I can't remember the exact quote, but something like that. The reality is, not actually as much as you'd think. Battlefield 6 is by far the most successful game of this year. Monster Hunter Wilds is probably up there as well. You've got Arc Raiders, which certainly doesn't qualify as an indie title. With the sort of budget that they've got and the support and backing that they've got. Call of Duty, even though it totally tanked, is still going to be one of the top sellers of the year. So is FC25. So there is a different goalpost you're shooting for as AAA, and there's a different set of constraints you have to hit. And this idea that Veteran Joystick has talked about before, that Asmon just said of, like, you just have to make a fun game. Okay, cool. Most indie games fail, vast majority, and that rate is going down, not up. So this idea that we're being overwhelmed with indie hits has more to do with the fact that there's more indie games being made now than there ever have in history. We've got a democratization of the tool set. Unreal is out there. Unity is out there. AI can actually help someone who doesn't know what they're doing kind of get going, and especially for single-player experiences where you don't have to worry about networking and some things. You can do a lot as a solo game dev, and you can do it faster. And if you land something that works, dude, it's amazing. It's so cool. I love, like, I don't play as many indie games as I should, but, I played too much Banana, which is awful. But, like, I played a ton of Balatro, and loved it. Just super well done. The solo dev stuff, it always going back to things like Stardew Valley or Flappy Birds or things like this. The problem is when you say it like you just got to focus on making a fun game, it's as if there's a bunch of people out there that aren't. And everybody's trying to do that. Whether you're an indie game all the way through to AAA, the solo dev to the thousands of people on your dev team. They're all trying to make a fun game. There's different systems and there's different player expectations and there's different budgets and different needs that go into that. But we're all trying to make fun games. That's what game devs are trying to do. And I like the word engaging. You're trying to make the compelling game experience something that'll be emotionally interesting, like emotionally hook a player and bring them into the experience and have them, want to keep playing until they finish the story or until whatever it is, right? And so this is something that I'm pushed back against because it makes it seem like that's all you got to do. Just go do it. Yeah, cool. A lot of people are trying. A lot of people with a lot of experience are trying and failing. And the most success by percentage still happens in the AAA space. The most dollars still get spent in the AAA space. Now, that makes sense because the AAA space also has the most people, the biggest teams. But there's not an indie game that's, going to be winning most sales of the year or anything like that. I think Battlefield, I don't know, I saw some crazy numbers. Like someone was saying maybe Battlefield 6 sold 25 million copies. And when you think about how much money, it's like it's a lot of money that they just made. And again, I go like when GTA 6 comes out and makes billions, most likely, that's what everybody's predicting. If they're right and that game makes billions, what does that mean for this argument? That like AAA is pathetic. AAA, that'll be the biggest financial gain through an entertainment product in the history of the world, most likely. Maybe like Disney World or something is probably higher. So anyway, it's not easy to make a fun game. It's not easy when you're a solo dev. It's not easy when you're a small team. It's not easy when you're a AAA team and you have different expectations across the board. I feel like I've said this before on other videos, but I'm saying it in this one because it's this idea of like, look, you just have to focus on like, take some risks and make something fun. It's like, yeah, a lot of people are doing that, and most of them are failing because it's really hard. You have to not just make the great game, you have to get attention to it. And it's nice when you're a solo dev or a small team because you don't need nearly as much attention or nearly as many sales. If an indie game sells 10,000 copies at like $20 a pop, maybe that's good enough, right? Like, oh, that took me less than a year. I just made, $200K minus fees, blah, blah, blah. Like, hey, this game paid for itself. It was good. That might be all you need. Doesn't work that way in the AAA space. That wouldn't have paid, one person's salary plus everything else and that they need to do their job in the United States or something like that. So, all right, there you go.
Gaming isn't broken, it's just happening somewhere else right now. And this year, it's undeniable. Indie games are winning, so let's break down these 6 games and why they matter. Let's start with the most ridiculous one, RV There Yet. It's a co-op game where up to 4 players try to drive a falling apart RV out of a deadly valley. Kind of like Overcooked meets off-roading. You're steering, repairing,
I really feel like this is the one thing as a streamer that I don't do. I never play video games with other people. I feel like if I did that, the last time that I did that was whenever me, McConnell, and Grayson played Dark and Darker, when Dark and Darker first came out, and people loved it. I gotta do that again.
You do.
The vehicle up cliffs while everything explodes around you. It's physics-based chaos.
That was a good day.
5 people made this. Veterans from Coffee Stain, the Goat Simulator studio. But still, 5 people, and they built the game in 3 months. Started as a game jam prototype. They liked it, fleshed it out.
You telling me they cooked this thing up in 3 months? And you got... Oh, man. Come on.
3 months from concept to release. It cost just £6, sold 1.3 million copies, hit 100,000 concurrent players on Steam in its first weekend, and for context, that's incredible. More than most AAA games see at launch. And here's why it worked. They embraced the jank, the RVs...
It's because the game's good, and yeah, you're right. A lot of friction inside of video games, like developers that are good know how to create good friction. Developers that are bad create bad friction. It's pretty simple.
By the way, he's totally correct there. There's a designer I know who gave a talk on this around the idea of rough edges, and You have to be careful about over sanding off the rough edges of your game. Sometimes the rough edge is where the fun lives, and games like Peak and Are We There Yet are, from one perspective, a bunch of rough edges. It would be difficult for a AAA studio to publish this, and I think that is a problem for AAA studios. I think that's something that they do need to address. Like they would feel like this doesn't live up to their brand or expectation, even though it was wildly successful and players loved it. But that's hard because they do have a different bar for art quality, all this different stuff. And this is a 5-person team, admittedly an experienced one, that had done other things successfully in some of these spaces before. So it wasn't like this was, somebody's first time out the door. But this is such a cool story, and this does happen. It is an exception, even in this space. Most of the time, if you brought 5 people together and said, go find something really fun to do, and you have 3 months, it wouldn't turn out this way. And this coming out of a game jam especially, I think that also speaks to that studio and their openness to like, hey, this is really working. Let's peel off of what we thought was going to be our experience and focus in on this. Like, lots of cool things going on there at the leadership layer to allow that to happen. So really excited. And I'm always like thrilled when stuff like this sort of pops off and does really well. And I think, it doesn't take away from gaming. It doesn't take away from other, from AA games or AAA games or funded startups or anything like that. When a game like this does really well, you could argue we're all fighting for the same player attention, and there's some truth in that. But honestly, most of the time, all the AAA devs I know, when they see something like this get really big, or they love playing Balatro, like they Blueprints, all these, they enjoy these games. They love them because they do something really well, and that's fun for everybody. And so it's like, great job, awesome job to the team. I haven't played this one. I'm just so far behind in my backlog, and I still like playing old games. But I was like enjoying Peak quite a bit. And this looked similar enough to that. And my friends, I think we just didn't get into it. We're more FPS people, and right now we're playing Battlefield 6, and I'm jumping back into Tarkov and things like that. But like, this looks like it's like a blast. I've watched some videos of it, and it just looks just like a really good time. So kudos to those 5 devs. Great job. Recognize, if you're out there, it's not like, let me grab 4 people and we're going to go make a game and sell 1.3 million copies for $6 and we're all going to be rich. Like, probably not. You're probably not. In fact, the overwhelming majority is you're not, because the smaller scale you go, the higher your failure rate is. And in the indie space, it's just off the charts. It's unbelievable. Even with the lower expectations and even the lower needs to actually sell enough to make a successful product. You see the exceptions. Be careful about that sort of survivorship bias. That we look at the ones that succeeded and say, look at what they're doing. See, it's like, we just do that. And it's like, yeah. And then a bunch of people try and fail. So, yeah.
Monkey controls, the physics glitches that send you flying. It's not a bug, it's a feature. They knew it, shipped it anyway, because the chaos was the point. Speed, madness, fun over perfection, and it paid off. These guys are laughing all the way to the bank right now. Then there's Clover
Honestly, like, watching this does make me want to play the game.
Now, warning, because this one is addictive. Don't say I didn't tell you.
Queso beat this game solo, did he?
It's a roguelike where you're trapped in a cell with a demonic slot machine. You spin to earn coins to pay off your debt each round, or you literally fall into a pit. It's part luck.
Why can't we do this in real life?
Part strategy. You're manipulating reels, triggering combos.
So this is like Balatro, but you die?
Charms to bend the odds, trying to snowball into a lucky run before you go bankrupt. 2 people made this game. 2 Italian dudes from Panic Arcade.
Nice.
That's it. It cost just £8.50, sold 100,000 copies in the first 24 hours, hit
100,000 in a day? That's incredible. Wow.
500,000 sales in just 8 days.
Just putting that into context, there are AAA games where if they sold 100,000 in a day, no one would be saying that's incredible. And again, you'd be like, well, yeah, but this is like it's a 2%. Yeah, exactly. It's a different world. You have to understand it's a different world. If Call of Duty sold 100,000 copies in the first day, everybody would be like, oh my gosh, what went wrong? They have to sell a lot more. And so there's different approaches you do to development when you have not just a need to sell a ton, but a very high player expectation, which in my opinion, Call of Duty completely missed on. I occasionally jump into the Call of Duty franchise going all the way back to like 2003 when the first one launched, but I haven't jumped into this latest one because it doesn't look like it did that well. And when I've seen some of the shots of it, I'm just like, that does not look like something I'm going to enjoy playing. But that means that they failed to capture me. So, maybe that's not that big a deal because, like I said, I rarely buy Call of Duty games, but they've failed to capture a lot of people who normally would buy Call of Duty games, and that's a big problem for them, even though they are probably going to outsell every game you see on this combined. And they're gonna do it in a short amount of time. It will not be enough because, again, different expectations. Now, there's a bunch of reasons as to why, and I'm thinking I might make another video about Call of Duty specifically and what I think happened there from someone just on the outside with game production experience. But yeah, like 100,000, wow, fantastic, and it is like way to go to developers. This is awesome. I am very happy for you. Like, big win. It's not the same. Different stakes, different systems, different player expectations.
In a day? That's incredible. Wow.
500,000 sales in just 8 days.
Holy
Currently sitting at
shit.
over 750,000.
I've never even heard of this
sold with a 90% positive rating on Steam.
See, I really got to get my head to the ground and be listening to these games, man. Because, I feel like I'm so far behind the ball in terms of playing a lot of these newer, cool games.
I can relate to that.
I am so bad at this right now. I need to do a better job.
Takes slot machine mechanics and turns them into pure gameplay dopamine. No microtransactions, no real money, just the addiction of watching combos pop off and your numbers go up. They made gambling fun instead of predatory, and we noticed. And a personal favorite of mine, Bull X Pit. This one's
this is my favorite, bro. I love this game so much.
Oh, this one was up on
mental.
Top
it's a
of
roguelike
Steam as well.
that mashes together
So
Breakout, Vampire Survivors,
Actually,
city building, and
did do well
probably
enough to have
even more
ICCU, so I
inspirations I've
misspoke
missed.
there.
You're batting magic balls up into hordes of enemies like a brick breaker. The balls ricochet and destroy things. You collect loot and power-ups, and then by the end of the run, the screen's filled with a ton of bouncing balls, obliterating everything. Between runs,
I remember whenever this game was popular in 1996, the version of this game back then. I liked that game back then too. Because you could get the ball and you could knock it up and then it would go bing, 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 bing. And I was like, oh, yeah. I would feel so good.
Brickles? I think he's talking about Brickles.
Switch into building a little city that unlocks permanent upgrades. It's multiple genres, one game, outrageously addictive, easy to pick up, satisfying to master, unique, addictive, fun. And it was made by only one person, Kenny-san.
Who the fuck did this? One guy?
It's pretty cool.
A solo developer, cost $12.99, sold 400,000 copies in its first week.
Should be more.
Overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam almost immediately. Here's why it works. Kenny threw multiple genres together with zero compromises. Stupid chaos that somehow just makes sense.
Here's why it works. Kenny threw multiple genres together with zero compromises. To me, what I hear is, I don't know why it worked. This is incredible. And that's actually correct. Like, if Veteran Joystick knows exactly why this game works, he should go do something that takes it and tweaks it slightly. And that's like what makes this so difficult. How hard is it to throw multiple genres together with no compromises and it all just works? It's insanely difficult. You have incredibly experienced dev teams trying, you have inexperienced dev teams trying, you have just players out there solo deving it. Like, everybody's trying, and most are failing. And he didn't, and he succeeded. And again, way to go, dude. Like, awesome. So cool. Not easy. Not easy at all.
Studios would have workshopped this to death.
I think actually there's a little bit more reason than madness here. I actually think that the way this game is balanced and the way the city building and the way the character design is made is actually extremely thoughtful and very good. It's extremely fucking good.
I wonder, though, how do we get to that place where it's so good? You could go thoughtful. Somebody really thought about this very hard, and I'm sure they did. I think a lot of times these solo devs do something that I wish more AAA devs would do. AAAs could and should be learning from these sorts of things, I think, and I mentioned that earlier, which is you get something functional and then you like play test the crap out of it, and you find the balance. Maybe I'm wrong, and the person who put this together put it in the giant spreadsheet that they built or whatever, and just it kicked out all the numbers, and you said this is how you do it, and this is how everything is going to be balanced, and it'll be a perfect game because numbers say so. Spreadsheet wins. Almost every time, perhaps every time I've seen that attempted in game development, it is wrong. Sometimes it's closer than if you did it blind, so it can still be a good starting point, and then you iterate from there. But almost always, something that comes off as incredibly well balanced is incredibly well balanced because a lot of time was spent playing it, trying it, and fixing what didn't feel good. Fixing, like, yep, that feels too strong, that feels too weak. And it's the repetition of doing that over and over and over. I hope I'm not misspeaking here. I believe that's how Balatro ended up where it did, was the lead developer just playing it over and over and over until it felt good. It felt balanced. The jokers felt balanced, and the various abilities felt balanced. And there was it seemed to have the right flow to it. And it's very hard to do. So is it thoughtful? Yes, absolutely. It's also usually built on the backs of a ton of iterations. Even if you're a solo dev just doing it by yourself to see if you like how it feels, and doing that over and over and over, and then tweaking values and doing it again and doing it again and doing it again and doing it again. And experience design helps there. Having some people who have done design on games and try to get balance right and systems design right is going to be very helpful to you. But yeah, this is, I think it's a combination of the very thoughtful and also just the iteration. And then I'm not going to lie, there's a bit of luck in there because some people do all of that work and they're very thoughtful and they do all those iterations and they don't find anything, or they think they do and then they ship it and nothing happens. So yeah.
Is it a roguelike? Is it a city builder? Pick one. He didn't. He just made all of it. And the result is something you genuinely can't find anywhere else. Unique in the truest sense. Highly recommend. Escape from Duckov, Ducks with guns. It's a top-down extraction shooter that just parodies Escape from Tarkov, a notoriously hardcore extraction shooter. You're literally a duck with a gun, scavenging loot, fighting hostile ducks and geese, trying to...
So, is this game really as good as people think it is?
Extract alive with your loot before time runs out. 5 people made this game. Team
Five
Soda,
people.
a small internal studio at Bilbili, the Chinese publisher, gave them the marketing muscle, but the actual dev team is tiny. It's a case of indie spirit with mid-marketing muscle, but the actual
is that the Chud? I thought that was the fucking
tiny.
Chud meme.
It's a case of indie spirit with mid-tier backing. It cost just $16.99, sold 1 million copies in its first week. Currently sitting at 3 million copies sold with 94% overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam. It hit 300,000 peak concurrent players. And I'll be honest, this isn't really my kind of game, but here's what they did. They took...
This game looks awesome to me. I think this is really cool.
Tarkov's hardcore extraction loop, tension, the depth, the loot systems, and made it PvE, solo friendly, kept everything that makes the genre interesting, removed the toxic PvP grief. Everyone assumed it would just be a meme. It looks like a meme, it smells like a meme, ducks with AKs, funny screenshots, move on. But it turns out it's a legitimately deep, polished shooter RPG that respects your time, and the players rewarded that massively.
The Duckov reminds me actually of Power World. It's maybe it's an overly simplistic analogy, but ducks with AKs and versus like Pikachu with an M16. That I think helped with the marketing, and I was really excited to see this do well because I think a lot of people were struggling to get extraction right, and in the end of this year we've seen Duckov and we've seen Arc Raiders do something that is different enough from Tarkov to be very distinct and also to bring more people into that genre. And you could argue, I think both games might be bigger than Tarkov in some ways. Tarkov is still sort of the OG, I think, in the same way that like Tarkov is kind of like PUBG, and then you had like Apex Legends and Warzone come out, and you could argue that those games were at times, well, PUBG stayed pretty big actually, but they were alternatives that were like they were different experience with a similar core battle royale loop, and it's cool to see these come out. Dekov is not quite my game. I think it someone on his chat's actually saying this. I wish I had a co-op function. If I could play this co-op, I would. I also understand how much more difficult that type of like networking is. So I understand why they did PvE, and it can totally work. Extraction does work solo. PvE, like leaving it in that space was probably a good move. Kept the development budget a lot lower. It's something that you're going to see actually a lot with these smaller teams. It's going to be harder to do networking well. One of the reasons actually I think Schedule 1 is like super cool in that sense, because that was and there's others too, like Peak and RV there yet, stuff like that are also, but a lot of these games like are going to start solo, and it's a good place to start if you're a solo dev, because networking is just a pain in the butt to get right, especially PvP. Oh my gosh. But yeah, anyway, sorry, getting into some of the details there. Duckov, super cool. Glad this one did well. I would debate whether you can say a studio backed by like a decent sized Chinese publisher is like, yeah, it's indie. Like, well, this is like I would take exception to that, but credit to them. Like 5 people putting this together. I'm sure they had some outsourcing support and some other things and some good marketing muscle behind it. But like, yeah, it's neat to see this doing well. Neat to see Extraction actually becoming more viable.
Shooter RPG that respects your time,
and
the players rewarded that massively. Slots and Daggers is a new fantasy roguelike where your dungeon battles play out on a slot machine. You're venturing through floors, fighting goblins and ogres, but instead of choosing attacks from a menu, you pull a slot lever. The symbols that line up dictate what happens. Swords mean you attack, potions heal you, shields block, critical hits, stuff like that. But there's strategy. You can hold certain reels, equip charms that bias outcomes, essentially deck build your slot machine before each run. It's inspired by D&D clearly, but filtered through casino mechanics. One person made this.
Yeah, this is really good too. This reminds me kind of like Uma Musume. Like, I remember playing that game and I was like, because before I played Uma, I would have never played a game like this, but now I think that I would be more I would be more willing to try it out.
That's like my Balatro experience. After I played Balatro, something like this actually is like, maybe that would be interesting, where prior to Balatro, I would have probably avoided it. But yeah, and I think like when I see these and I look at the decisions that the single dev made, it's so cool in so many of these. What they didn't put in, like the choices they made of what to show, how they sort of solved what could have been very complicated problems. And I think, again, this speaks to the restrictions, the limitations of being indie, with what that means for your art style, the number of elements you're going to have on screen, the fidelity of the game, all this different stuff. And to make a good game inside of those constraints is insanely difficult. And a AAA studio would struggle to hit the simplicity of something like this, because they would have so many people with good ideas that are genuinely trying to make a better game, or an expectation of visual fidelity or like just general quality overall, and they'd be like, no, not like that. Again, maybe smoothing off too many rough edges or whatever it might be. They could get in their own way, and I think they have gotten in their own way. I know of major studios that only in retrospect look back and realized that they had an R&D something that somebody else released that was not nearly as well known, and it totally blew up. And they realized they had that thing in R&D, and they kicked it, they shut down the team or iceboxed it or whatever, because they're like, yeah, we're not sure this is viable in the market, and we're, the quality isn't there, and let's get rid of it. And then they find out, somebody else makes a very, very similar product to them that they actually had their hands on and they missed out on, because they couldn't see they couldn't take the risk that smaller dev could take. And that again, it's a difference. Like, it's an advantage of the indie. They do get to take more risks. There's no doubt about that, because they have to, because most of them fail. And so anyway, cool to see something like this. Yeah, Balatro is my version of like why I might try something like this sometime. It seems pretty clever.
A solo German developer, 6 months of development. It costs £4
Pretty
right now.
derby.
Only been out for 4 days. Already sold 50,000 copies with 94% positive reviews on Steam. He just made one weird thing really well. Intentionally crude art style, proper hand-drawn, small...
I get so frustrated when Veteran Joystick says stuff like, he just did this. Just did this one thing really well. Like, the word just there implies... well, I don't want to overinterpret it. It could just mean he's saying, look at how much he was focused, like kind of what I was alluding to earlier. But it often is framed as like, look, see, this is all you have to do. Just do this. Ugh. Like, go ahead, try. It's not easy. There's a lot of random involved in whether you succeed or not, and there's a lot of people doing everything that this person did and not succeeding.
Thing really well, intentionally crude art style, proper hand-drawn, small
Well,
scope.
I don't think it's crude. I mean, I actually think that this art style is very deliberate and well done. I think that every art style, like if you go with a PS1 art style, or like this is like a 2000s, this is a video game that would run on Windows 2000 Professional, right? And it would be a great game. That's the kind of experience that I think a lot of people like. They enjoy those types of games.
For sure.
And so really it's not about the graphics, it's not about anything else, it's just about the gameplay. That's what matters more than anything, is the gameplay and the fluidity of the gameplay. And that's what AAA developers really lack right now, is that they just don't really have that ability to lock down a enjoyable, fun gameplay loop. That's the big weakness. And it seems like it's like, oh, the big problem with video games nowadays is the game part of the game. Yeah, that's it.
Yes and no. So yes, in that same sense, the thing I've been saying, that for everybody, that's the hard part. AAA, AA, triple I, A, single I, solo, like everybody's trying to lock down something. And actually, one of the challenges of the modern world, that's in addition to this, that AAA has both an advantage in, but also has to do much better at, is getting their game in front of a lot more people. You have like this two-headed beast now, where you can't just make a great game, if you build it, they will come. That's not as true as it was. The space is so filled up by so many products from all these different levels, most of which fail. The ones that succeed are the outliers. They are the exceptions. And one of the reasons they succeed is because they somehow got attention. And how did they get attention? Well, if there's a magic formula there, nobody really knows it, because, or at least the people who you'd think would know it don't. And sometimes an indie dev gets lucky, and then we try to analyze, well, why did it work? And, we can armchair quarterback that, and, hindsight is 2020, and say, oh, obviously it was this and that and the other. None of it was obvious. Veteran Joystick or Asmon, predict these before they happen. Go look at upcoming games before they launch and tell me what you're going to succeed. One of the problems with Asmon is his platform might actually lead to a game being successful just because he predicted it, because his platform is larger than the number of people that would need to buy many of these indie games for it to be successful. Less true probably for Veteran Joystick. I think he's a smaller YouTuber, much bigger than me, but smaller overall. But you have to be seen. And so you have this two-headed beast that you have to slay when you're developing games. How do I make something fun, engaging, whatever you want to say, a compelling gameplay loop? How do I do that? That's very difficult. Very, very difficult. That's already, if you do that well, congratulations, you're in the 1% or above. And then you have to actually get it noticed. And the combination of those two things together is like, oh my gosh, it's so hard. So anyway, yeah, credit to the person who did this. This isn't something that idea of this is what AAA games are missing. Elden Ring did this really well. I anticipate GTA is going to do this really well. I've really enjoyed Battlefield 6. I played a ton of it. Monster Hunter Wilds did. Certainly there was critique of it, but a lot of people had a really great time. I'm bringing up those because for whatever reason they're top of mind. But like Arc Raiders did a really good job with this, and yeah. Again, someone might be, well, Arc Raiders is indie. No, it's not indie. Sorry, but it is a smaller studio. It is actually hitting at that like AAA level for most people. Whatever, again, even what the definition of these terms are is all sorts of crazy. It's hard to do that. It's hard to get noticed. It's hard to get seen out there in the world. And the ones that do it, like, congrats, kudos to you. You did something right. The interesting thing is many of these companies struggle to repeat the success. Not all, but many do. And that makes sense too, because you can't just say, well, look at our playbook from last time, let's do that again. What worked last time won't work the next time, or you can't guarantee it will work the next time. So anyway, yeah.
It's more accessible. Yeah, and a lot of these other games too, another big factor with them is that they reward short, intensive play sessions. And I think that that's something that, for example, Balatro did very well. It's something that Vampire Survivors did very well. And I think that you're seeing like people move away from the longer engagement, 40-minute, maybe 30-minute league games, and people want a 10-minute game. They want a 15-minute game or a 5-minute game that they can pause or move in and out of.
But polished, no chase.
Some players, and I would agree, the attention span is decreasing over time. I think that's happening across all media. And it's something you have to react to and respond to. There are still players who enjoy the longer play sessions of a Tarkov or a Counter-Strike or a League. They're like even Battlefield 6, a lot of the game modes last longer than those 10 minutes and aren't as easy to jump in and out of. But yeah, certainly there's a market out there. And actually for me, I wonder how much of this is that more and more people spend a lot of time on mobile. And the mobile player expectations, player patterns are different than you see in classical PC and console spaces. Just different sort of norms around what you do, what you don't do, how long it takes, all this different stuff. Like I think this is happening even on things like YouTube. TikTok is an example where people went from longer form to shorter form content and like exploded. And now others are emulating that with YouTube Shorts and Facebook Reels and Instagrams, whatever they are. Are they Reels too? Yeah, they're Reels too, I guess. I'm not a big social media guy, if you can't tell. But like there is that shift, and one of the other things that's an advantage to the person who's targeting that means you don't need as big an experience. You need a replayable short loop. And Balatro, again, did that. I think it's a good example of like a game that did that really well. But there's also people that really enjoy the longer form stuff. GTA 6, to go through that story is going to be a longer thing. You might be able to pause and move in and out of it from that perspective, but that's going to be a longer thing. And a lot of people are going to play that in long bursts of time, like they do right now with a lot of games. Like I said, Tarkov, Battlefield, League, Counter-Strike, whatever. These are very highly successful games. So, yeah.
Scale or endless content, just a tight replayable loop.
Back to basics,
something genuinely new. I've got a feeling this one could blow up pretty soon. Another one I highly recommend checking out.
Maybe and
Megabonk, we covered this one already. A solo developer, Vampire Survivors in 3D, sold 1 million copies in 2 weeks. Currently estimated around 3 million copies.
This was a really good game. I hate to say it, I actually liked Ball Pit more. But that also comes as a bit of a boomer who really just loves arcade games. I really love arcade games. So, Ball Pit was definitely for me. But I really liked this game too.
He sold. It's the
amazing.
Same pattern, tiny team, weird idea, massive success.
Yep.
So what do all of these have in common?
And it seems obvious in retrospect. What did I do? Oh, I took this other successful game and I put it in 3D and look how well it worked. It was very hard to do that. Getting all that balance right and the feel of that right, the progression of that right, like the way that game played. I watched actually a friend play it for a while, and he was having a good time with it. It's not necessarily my style of thing, but like seemed really well put together, really nice compelling loop. There's this concept of interest curve that comes into this as well. Like I think it nailed interest curve really well, which often roguelikes and battle royale games actually do. They have like an advantage there. In some sense, I think it's one of the reasons that especially roguelikes have gotten so popular. But it's hard to do, even though in retrospect we can just describe it in these few words. And that's noteworthy because somebody just went and did it and then spent the time iterating on it for it to feel good. They could have not iterated long enough to make it feel good, or they could have not found through those iterations and through their thinking through it, they might not have found the right balance point, and then the game wouldn't be successful. It could be very subtle things that would tip the balance of a game working or not working, and then they still had to be found somehow. And like all of that is so difficult. So credit to these devs who are doing it, but don't think this is easy, and don't think that AAA is not trying to, in its own way, with its different set of constraints, do all these exact same things, and actually having a reasonably high success rate, while the vast majority of the games that try to do this at smaller scale fail, get shut down. People who are working on it for free or for rev share or whatever get nothing after a lot of effort. Like that is the standard case, is you make almost nothing on these. You certainly don't make back the time you put into it. And like be aware of that, like cautionary tale. Be careful of the survivorship bias. It's not winning the lottery. There's skill involved here, but in some ways it's a lot closer to winning the lottery than you'd think.
Same pattern, tiny team, weird idea, massive success.
Yep.
So what do all of these have in common? Innovation, risk, fun first, sales second.
They were made with a combined budget of less than a meal for 2 people at Five Guys.
Vision from people who clearly love games. While 26% of European game professionals were laid off in the past year, with over 10% of them still looking for work and 13% of them leaving the industry entirely, these tiny teams were just building something genuine.
Another thing too is that a lot of these video game, like these guys that are really good at coding, some of them might have skills that are unique to the video game industry, but some of them have skills that I think can be translated to other industries. So like, where do you think you're going to get paid better? Are you going to get paid better at, one of these like new drone defense companies like Anduril or something like that, or Palantir? Or are you going to get paid better at Blizzard? Jeez, guys. Ooh. Yeah, you've got fintech. Yeah, well, that's another one too. Yeah, financial technology, exactly. Yeah.
New. The craziest part of all of this, you can buy all 6 of these games for less than one AAA release at 60 quid. 6 completely unique experiences, hundreds of hours of gameplay, all innovative, all made by people who took genuine risk because they love video games. And most of these games had more daily players than Bloodlines 2.
That was a flopperooski, wasn't it?
Game, a game that peaked at 27,000 concurrent players on Steam for a fraction of the price and a fraction of the development time. The pattern.
This is something Veteran Joystick does in some of his other videos that I'm not a huge fan of, which is he cherry picks some like utter flop. And I'm just like, you know what? Put all the indie games that came out in the last 2 years in a pile and pick a random one. The overwhelming odds are that thing lost to the person who made it money. That's not to say it didn't make some, but like the time and whatever you paid in developing it for assets or whatever else cost you lost money over the course of developing it. And so you can pick a game like this and say, look, this one flopped. And I can say, yeah, so do most indie games. And that's why, for me, as game developers, we're all in it together. We're all out there trying to make compelling, engaging experiences. We have different constraints. We have different challenges. There's bad leadership, poor decisions by publishers or external partners or, devs or whatever that happen across the board. And the thing that binds us together as game devs is we are all trying to make something players love. or in the broad, like you can point to like, well, maybe that person isn't, or maybe that person isn't. Well, that guy's just about the money, or that person, they're just there because they thought this was a good job. Okay, the vast majority of people that I have met in game dev love game dev, and they love it because they love games and they want to make great games. The exception, the minority, are the people that are just in it for the money or trying to figure out how to just like purely make a buck or whatever it is. Like most of the people love it. And in fact, it's something that happened recently with all the well-funded, well-pedigreed developers that got VC money and went with VCs were just like, oh, gaming's profitable. Let's just throw money at that, and then we can make a bunch of money. Look, League of Legends makes a bunch of money. World of Warcraft makes a bunch of money. Let's hire X Riot, X Blizzard people, and they'll go make successful live service games, and we'll be printing $1 billion a year. Like, and they all pretty much tanked. It wasn't because they weren't taking risks. Many of them did quite a bit of risk taking. And it wasn't because they didn't know what they were doing. Many of them had a lot of experience. It wasn't because they didn't have the money. They certainly had the money. Some of them had a lot of time. Some of them didn't have as much time, depending on how much money they got. Some of them made really poor decisions here and there. Some of them made great decisions and it didn't work out. You can't guarantee anything in this industry, and the people that come into games with the express purpose of just making money have to understand that this is also about game making. There are major publishers out there that are much more financial in their focus as they develop games. Absolutely true. But even they, in order to be successful, have to be thinking about, wait, is it a good game? Is it engaging? Is it compelling? Now, there are obviously the toxic, like just trying to get you with the loot boxes, sort of Skinner box type stuff of what we're just trying to create dopamine hooks in your brain, and so that you'll end up paying us a lot of money and whatnot. That absolutely exists. It's true. That's there. I'm not going to deny it. But in my experience, the vast majority of game devs, they're out there trying to make a great game. And one of the hardest things about this is you can be in the games industry for a very long time and you can actually get pretty good at it, and you can never make a successful product. Like, I feel very fortunate that I worked on multiple successful products. It's not something to take for granted. And, some people, I saw a post by somebody, I think on LinkedIn, and it would like, he'd been in the industry for like 15 or 20 years or something, worked on all kinds of different scales, and like never even shipped anything. And he had massive experience, but he had like this sort of existential crisis. He ended up going to work for a major publisher or studio that had a live service product, because part of him was just like, I just want to ship something that players will care about, because that's what he always wanted to do, and that's what never worked out for him. And so many things have to go right for a video game to win. And so we're all in it. Yeah, sure, some people get like persnickety about what's in what category, and well, that's mobile, so they're not as cool, or that's indie, they don't have it, like, or that's AAA, they just solve all their problems with money. And it's like, dude, you can't solve these problems with money. You can't solve these problems by hiring only the most experienced people. Both those things have been tried ad nauseum and failed. Something else has to go on. You have to figure out that magic bit. A bunch of things have to all, like the way I describe it is, a bunch of your people have to all hit home runs at the same time for a game to work. And if you're solo, you have to hit a whole bunch of home runs at the same time by yourself. So, credit to these devs. I'm not a fan of the take, and again, the cherry picking. Like, look at this failed game. Like, go look, cherry pick Battlefield 6, because you said that you could buy all these games for less than the price of Battlefield 6. Battlefield 6 made more money by a bucket load than all of these games together, and it had to because of its budget and its marketing spend. But it did very well, and it also had more players than all of these games combined by a huge margin. And that's not to knock the indie. The indie should have no expectation of that. That's just to call out, like, it's a different board we're playing on, depending on where we are in the industry. Clair Obscur plays in a different board than Call of Duty, plays in a different board than Megabonk. And we can all respect each other while we look at each other playing on those different boards, but you better not, and this is another set of mistakes that happen, you better not take a bunch of AAA practices and try to do that with a team of 5 people, or, with a startup, a brand new startup. You also can't necessarily have the same tolerance for risk that he's describing, or for in an indie, that you can't have an indie level of risk tolerance for a AAA product. Because if you go and mess up EAFC, it's not just like, oh no, you messed up EAFC because you took too many risks and some people will call you bold. It's like the players will be ticked at you. You ruined a game that they love and that they were expecting. And you have to meet those expectations while innovating. But if you innovate in the wrong ways, they're going to get mad at you. An indie dev doesn't have to worry about that as much. And again, they have a whole bunch of other things to worry about, and they're most likely to fail. So I feel like I'm, saying the same thing 17 different times. I'm really excited to see all the games succeed. I'm really bummed when games don't work out. Sometimes I see it coming because of what I do, and that's always sad. That's not like, I'm never like happy to see a bunch of people sink a bunch of time into something, whatever size the team is, whether it's 5 people or 200 people. I'm never happy like when that doesn't work out well for them, or when they're really struggling to make ends meet. Like, it sucks. The the Bloodlines 2, like, that sucks. It sucks for that dev team. You could say they deserve it, right? Because if they'd made a good enough game, a lot of people would have loved it, right? Fair enough. Yeah, you could say that, I guess. You could also say that all those indie games that failed deserved it, and there's a brutal way in which that's true, because the players are the ultimate arbiters of whether you're successful or not. Your job is to make a game that they'll want to play, and then also get them to play it somehow. And both of those are so much harder than I feel like people understand. So anyway, yeah.
Players on Steam for a fraction of the price and a fraction of the development time. The pattern's clear. Small teams moving fast, building what they actually want to play.
Well, it's what I've been saying before, right? Where a lot of these video games become too big to succeed. The machine becomes so big and so bureaucratic that it becomes oppressive and actually a barrier to creativity and to productivity. And I think that you see this happen in all kinds of industries, where small teams that are efficient can be more agile and function like a Viking longboat. I feel like a lot of Viking longboats probably didn't crash and hit icebergs and fucking everybody dies, right? I'm sure it happened, but not like the Titanic. It's much easier to turn one of those than it is a Titanic. And I think that's what happens, is that you have these really, really big games that are in development for 7 or 10 years, and big surprise, by the time this game comes out, the entire industry has changed. And I think that really small teams are able to look at a trend, immediately see what the customers want, react to it, create a gameplay loop, and then put it out there. I think that also there's a lot of video games now that have so many additional and extra things attached to them. So like a really good example of this, and this is like a criticism that I have, is like Digimon has like a card game that's built into it. I think it's kind of like Gwent. That's what I would assume. There is no reason for that to be in the game. A lot of these like weird features that video games have that are like these like secondary game functions. Really, I hate the card game. I don't even know what it is. I never even played them. LOL people like those. I don't really think that they matter. Really, I don't. Like mini games inside of video games, I think are way overdone right now. They are tremendously overdone, and like meta level progression, mini game progression, stuff like that, I think is totally fucking overdone. And there's just so much of it now that it's exhausting.
It's interesting. You're like, we want you to take risks. Is that Digimon card game a risk? Was Gwent a risk for The Witcher? Because Gwent was a successful thing. It was a successful part of the Witcher game. Is it, and this is the nature of risk, and you could say like, well, these are small risks. We mean big risks, so fair enough, right? But, CDPR took a risk by putting Gwent in The Witcher and having these cards that you collect and like you play Gwent. And this is going back to BioWare did this with Knights of the Old Republic with like Pazak and these things. This isn't some new thing. I don't play enough of those sorts of games to know if these are everywhere, if like there's just a mini game overload going on. I guess I haven't seen that, but I'm probably not the best person to ask. But like, hey, there someone took a small risk. Okay, it didn't work. Cool. That's what can happen when you take small risks. And If that small game had been an indie game and it just failed, you'd never heard of it. Because it's in the AAA game that a lot of people played, you've played it and have heard of it. And it was a risk that failed. And this, like, I don't know, it kind of like highlights your expectations for good shift dramatically depending on where you sit in the hierarchy of game development, in terms of like budget size, team size, project size type of thing.
He's diluting the vision. No focus groups, removing the weird
the reason why, for example, it works for a game like Ball Pit is that it's basically it's your upgrade function, the same as you had in Hades, right? For example. So it's okay, and it's also very, very fast. You place your buildings, then you shoot the guys out, and then you're done, and you do another mission, right? It's not this long, involved process.
This is a great example of hindsight is 2020, armchair quarterbacking, rationalizing what works based on having played it, and like, oh yeah, well this works because of this, but you shouldn't usually do. Who called it before? When you start calling them before, then like that's worth listening to. But when you already know that the game has a ton of wish lists, or when you've already seen it be successful, our brains are really good at rationalizing whatever we see, whatever we perceive. Like we see things and we're like, oh, got it, I understand why that makes sense. If you'd said like, before you saw what the outcome was, what's going to happen, we actually struggle with that quite a bit. But we're really good at convincing ourselves, well, it's obvious. Once we've already seen it play out. Oh yeah, it was obviously going to happen. No, it wasn't.
Then you're done and you do another mission, right? It's not this long, involved process. Yakuza says otherwise. Well, Yakuza has its own, so does Mario Party, right? But it's a different genre of type of game. And I think also it's known for that type of stuff. It's like WarioWare, for example. But I think that in general, a lot of these video games that try to be like an everything game, I think that they just end up exhausting players.
It's just, here's an idea.
I do think that's true. And it's funny because he started talking about this from, games within games. And I look at MMOs. They're the ultimate. Like, it's not one game. One of the hardest things to do is go like, well, okay, give me the short, succinct version of what an MMO is. And it's not it being so many different elements inside of one game. There's so many different goal states. There's so many things you can do. It actually attracts widely different player bases to it that all coexist inside of one thing. And like, why does any of it work? How many WoW killers were out there after WoW launched? You can reverse engineer why WoW worked and why it took all the, why it beat EverQuest 2 back in the day and Star Wars Galaxies and those things, and why EverQuest 2 didn't work and all that. You can go back into that and you can like puzzle your way and again rationalize why this worked. But man, there is an element of, well, it was probably tested a heck of a lot. There were probably a lot of bad versions of it that got shifted. They were probably responsive to the changes in the environment, which, even as a large company like Blizzard, and responsiveness has changed what that means. Back then it was like, oh, within a couple of months it changed is like pretty good. Nowadays, sometimes you're expecting days, weeks, or even hours. But like you have so much inside of MMOs. Some of them worked and some of them didn't. They are collections of different games that are somehow bolted together in a way that feels good to play, and different people find very different reasons to play them. So yeah, Mario Party, I was like, he's like, these are, well, that's different genre. Yeah, but no, is there a game that perfectly fits inside of a genre, or are they all sort of like blended to some extent between different things? There's some amount of overlap, or there could be. And if you threw in a little bit of this or a little bit of that, would that make it worse or better? You don't know, because not only is it about like, what did I throw in versus not, it's also what's the quality of what I threw in and how I integrated it into these systems. So sometimes mini games work really well, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes they work really well for some players and not others. Some people, I think, hated like lock picking in Oblivion and Skyrim, and other people were like, this is really cool, I like getting good at this. who's to say, right? Who's to say? And that maybe that's the point. Maybe some people then develop the lockpicking skill and other people don't. Inside of Oblivion or Skyrim, that's your choice. You get to pick because it's a big enough game for that. It's not a refined down, focused solo dev style experience. It's something else, and it's highly successful.
Let's make it.
Just going for you to made an MMO. Yeah, I played an MMO a lot.
Properly
That's how
working.
I know.
2025
has
video truly proved something. Innovation beats budget. Passion beats polish. Fun beats everything. Gaming
fun and just gameplay. Gameplay matters more than anything, right? But the Digimon game is fun. Plus, it has sprites from the original VPET toys. Yeah, I just think it's just bloat. It doesn't matter, and it's just more bullshit that I don't care about. Like, I get some people might care about it. They might like it. I don't. I think it's a waste of space. It's a waste of time, and then there's no reason to have it. That's where I'm at. That's what I think.
I want to call something out. Gameplay beats everything. Gameplay beats everything for games that focus on gameplay. There are games that have focused on story that had pretty rough gameplay that have been highly successful because the story was really good. I don't want to knock The Last of Us, but like The Last of Us wasn't known as this is the most elite gameplay in the world. Telltale Games, they're whatever they had, like the X-Men and the like Game of Thrones games and stuff like that. Those were story-based games. The gameplay wasn't what made them exciting. It was the story, and it was your participation in the story. For me, gameplay is the most common thing that we go for, and I think makes sense in games. But there are other things, and it's really about, can I engage a player? Can I have a compelling loop of some kind, be it narrative or gameplay? Heck, you could. It's tougher, like maybe Journey, but what's a good example of one there where it was just about the amazing art and people just wanted to go through it for the art? I'm not the right guy because I'm not into that sort of game, but I'm sure someone out there could like point, oh no, this is the one. Like the gameplay was but the story and the art was so good, and that was why I played it. And can you find a compelling core loop? Can you find an engaging thing? And that's not necessarily always a gameplay loop, right? It can be a story loop. It can be something else. So that's what's interesting here. And people still go to casinos, right? They pull a slot machine. Like people who make slot machines digitally or physically, like they've got those things down to a science, and people engage with it. And not my thing. I'm not even a fan of them. I don't like the gambling stuff generally. I'm generally against gambling in most of its forms. But they're working. They're bringing in people. It's not the most compelling gameplay for a lot of people, but for some people it really works. And so this is also where, there's just so much nuance to this. There's I think the problem with this, the way that this is framed, is it overstates it to the point where we miss the actual lessons that these industries or these different parts of the industry could learn from each other. Because I think there are things they could learn from each other. I think it is useful. And by the way, most of the AAA designers I've ever worked with are endlessly playing games like this and trying to learn from them and understand them and talk about why they worked and why they didn't. And they can have insight that you wouldn't believe. Some of the systems designers I worked with were just so good at picking apart. And yet they even knew that just because they could identify it doesn't mean they could replicate it or do that with a slightly different thing and have it, be wildly successful. Because one of the things that you realize if you're in this industry for any length of time is, oh my gosh, it's super hard. And when the one thing you want to never do is be hyper confident that you've definitely solved it now before it's actually worked in front of real players at scale. You can do all the testing and all the closed alphas and friends and family and hiring play testers and doing everything you can possibly do to do all that you can to figure out if your game is going to succeed or not, and it can still fail when all of those signs were good. You just don't know. I was talking actually to a very experienced executive producer about this recently because he was working on a game and he moved off the team. They kept going and he was hoping that they did really well. But one of the things he was saying is we were getting top marks, and from some of the playtesting, he's like, oh, you're getting marks that we've never seen before in some of these markets. It's that's awesome, way to go, huge, you're winning, awesome. And yet he was still I don't know. You just don't know, right? We might be hitting top marks and this thing might still die. It might not find the audience. It might not end up having that compelling long-term loop that allows friends to get into it and pull their friends into it and pull their friends into it, and et cetera, till it snowballs into something that sells the somewhere between tens of thousands to millions or tens of millions of copies required for this to be successful, depending on budget and team size and all those things. So yeah, I'm just repeating myself. It's harder than you think, and don't think that the industry isn't learning from each other.
Isn't broken, it's just happening somewhere else right now.
Yep.
In basements, spare bedrooms, small studios who still remember why they got into this industry in the first place. That's where all the innovation is happening right now, and if you can't see it by now, then you need to get your eyes checked. As always, thanks so much for watching. Appreciate you. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a
really
like,
good
drop
video.
a comment, and subscribe to the channel. There's plenty more where this came from. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next one.
I disagree. It's not a really great video. You know, our creators, I think, did some really cool stuff in a genre that everyone else was having trouble cracking. Very innovative. Very, very well done. Like, kudos to Embark. They're not indie. They're not small. They pulled off something quite impressive. And they've made a heck of a lot of money doing it. Like, way to go, them. I feel like we discount this. Veteran Joystick discounts these sorts of things, doesn't like those examples. And some of the other like big successes, like even, you know, the Harry Potter game, right? What successful IP and this thing, yeah, even like so much of that stuff is still fails, even with a great IP and all this different stuff. That game outsold Call of Duty that year, which at a time when Call of Duties were just winning year after year after year, most sold game of the year. It was either a GTA, a Red Dead Redemption, or a Call of Duty, and then Harry Potter, you know, shows up out of nowhere. And like Hogwarts Legacy, boom, top game. What the heck? Where'd that come from? You know, and you can't predict. You're doing the best you can when you're out there at whatever level you're deving. So anyway, I don't think this is a great video. I do think it is from the perspective of, hey, if there's, you know, you want to try some cool indie games that you maybe haven't seen, I'd say probably all those games are worth trying out. The problem is they're no longer like unknown gems. As a friend of mine recently called me out, I was like, oh yeah, I played this game, Gunfire Reborn. It was really cool. It was like a little small little game. And he was like, dude, small little game. It's got like, by that time, when I first played it didn't, but like by that time it had like hundreds of thousands of reviews on Steam. It was like, that's not a little game, Ben, you know? And it's like, well, fair enough. But relative to some of these other titles, it certainly was. And when I was playing it at first, it was a bit smaller than that. But I got to it, you know, way after. And so, you know, these games that they're in this video and that they've sold some hundreds of thousands of copies or whatever, or millions, means that they're no longer the hidden gems, right? You have to go somewhere else to go find the hidden gems, the ones that nobody knows about, the ones that only have 5,000 people playing, but are incredible experiences that just didn't get traction because they couldn't find a way to get in front of the right player base. Those are really, they're out there. I guarantee it. Like there's so many games that have come out. I guarantee there's just something out there that like you would love and it would be so entertaining and you'll never find it. And I think that's another reality of game dev. Sometimes you can land on one element, you can get people in front of your game and then they find out that no one likes it. Or you can make an amazing game that if only you could get in front of people, they would love it, and you can't get it in front of people. You don't know how to do that. You can't solve that problem. And that happens for big teams as well as small teams. So anyway, yeah, probably some cool games. I recommend, you know, they're not my cup of tea for where I'm at in life right now, but like, hey, give them a shot, right? So from that perspective, neat video. On otherwise, like completely, I think it's an overly confrontational take that, and like a lot of Veteran Joystick videos, attempt to amp up the war. Like there's this war between indies and AAAs, and there's not. That's not how it goes.
W video. Absolutely. Give me a second. Wait a second. Sorry. Another video. Anyway, my point is that I really, really like this. I totally agree with it. Have you beaten the Moon Boss? I have not. Clover Pit is fire, by the way. Maybe I should try it out. Here's the thing. Mouthwashing was also very good storytelling. Indie devs are just better at that. Well, are also better at that? Well, I think that, I mean, you can have great storytelling at a AAA level, like, for example, Expedition 33. Like, you can have that. It's just that in many of these games, it just simply is not there. Give the video a like. I think this is really good. From Veteran Joystick. And I saw it recommended to me, and I wanted to try it out myself. So this duck game is actually pretty popular. I'll watch this. I'm not going to watch it today, but I'll watch it maybe tomorrow or something. I've never seen one of his videos before. He only has 25,000 subs. So I'll have to try it out and see what happens. And indie devs don't have the restrictions on storytelling or interceptors. Well, I think also that here's another really big reason why indie devs are successful. The reason why is because indie development, you're telling a story, and there's only like 3 or 2 people that are involved in writing the story. Whereas whenever you're telling the story for maybe Assassin's Creed Shadows, you had 30, 40, 50 people that are involved in one way or another with the narrative design. And so whenever you have such a large team spread out, the message of a story gets diluted. And I think that unless you have like one guy that's at the helm that's directing this, like for example, the way the Kojima, right, is he's the guy that's directing the way the story is going to go, then you're going to have a problem with making things like that happen. Yeah, also you have HR. Yeah, sure.
Okay, this actually reminds me of something he said earlier that I wanted to comment on, so he just brought it back here. What about Baldur's Gate 3? Lots of people there involved in the story. And you could say like, well, Sven was the dictator, but he wasn't. I mean, he had the vision for the game and he was holding people to it. But actually, one of the things when I talked to the devs that worked on Baldur's Gate 3, which I did like a year or two ago, I talked to some people in the cinematics, and they were heavily involved in the story side of things. He wasn't telling everyone what to do. It wasn't the creative auteur who held everything in his head and then dictated out. That doesn't scale. That bottlenecks. Like, that is not a sustainable model at the scale at which these games are being made. What was actually impressive was that he shared a vision for what the game was, and then everybody got to go operate inside of that vision. And it's very, very hard to do. And here he also gets something very right. The fewer people you have, the easier it is to maintain alignment and focus on the same thing and bring something cohesive together. This is absolutely true. This is the problem with the bureaucracy. His statement earlier of games being too big to succeed. I disagree that that's like a blanket true statement, but I do think many games have run into the problem of longer development cycles, higher salaries, more devs. All 3 of those have been going up at the same time, which has, even though revenue from games has been going up over time, costs have been going up faster. And studios and publishers were slow to react to this and try to understand, what do we do about it? Because we seem to need all this time based on how we used to work, and they're not necessarily innovating on how they're working so that they can get the focus in and get the right things done with fewer people. And you say like, well, you're agreeing with the video. In some ways, yes, I am. Like, AAA has a serious problem with scale, and they often try to throw money at problems that and people and time at that problems that, like, those aren't necessarily going to solve it on their own. It's not a process. It's not a simple like inputs and outputs type of system. It's a chaotic, complex mess that involves a bunch of humans trying to figure something out together. And it's like an organism rather than a machine. And when you treat it like a machine, you have more issues. So here, I think that broadly there is that idea of like, yeah, you got too big. You had too much of a dead team. You ran them for too long a period of time. And you paid top dollar for so many senior people. Could you have cut costs in a variety of ways, focused more, and had a better final game that was less expensive to make? Probably. This is the problem, though, generally with human endeavor. As humans come together, we become less effective for every person you add overall. It's very, very difficult to create large organizations that function well. And it's what's incredible is that, like, when we do manage to do that, like, those companies just go on to do incredibly well, although eventually they tend to falter under their own scale and bureaucracy. Things like Google and Netflix is still doing pretty well, but not as well as they were for a while. And like, you've got Meta, you've got like, these are giant companies with established solid revenue streams, but they've scaled to the point where even their mistakes are being shown. And a lot of it does come down to bureaucracy and the layers and layers of an organization like that, and the compliance and regulations and all these different things doesn't help. So there is an advantage to being smaller. That advantage is so strong that there are many, many, many more smaller teams, and most of them still fail. So we're looking at the outliers.
A problem with making things like that happen. Yeah, also you have HR. Yeah, sure. And you have 30 people telling them how to change it. Yeah, it's very hard to design something that is like a creative passion.
Designed by committee
by
or
consensus, especially not by corporate
like
consensus.
Democratic.
And I think that's the big weakness that a lot of these games have, is that they're just they're designed by consensus. That's it. Have you seen Ben Shapiro crashing out in the Megyn Kelly show? No, I haven't. I'll look at that in a minute. But yeah, designed by HR. Well, it's approved by HR. It's not designed by HR, but it's approved.
Yeah, the thing there, maybe there are places where HR is approving. I honestly, I don't want to say, that's really not happening very much, because maybe it is and I just haven't seen it. That's possible. Honestly, HR departments aren't making a ton of calls around what the game is. They're making a ton of calls about maybe hiring policies and who gets promoted and like what training people go to, and like they're doing a bunch of things that are HR functions, and those do have an indirect consequence on who might be working on a game and whatever. But the idea that like HR is looking at the game and like approving the storyline or whatever, the only way I could see that happening on a regular basis outside of, again, a company that maybe does that and I'm just not tracking it, is if somebody who was a developer or somehow around the development team complained to HR about something in the game, and then HR was like, oh no, and like that's the only way I kind of see that loop functioning. That approved by HR, I don't like, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You can be like, no, in my studio that was it, all decisions were run by HR for approval. Like I have not seen that. So yeah, that is at least not everywhere.
So it was actually extremely small, and everyone being on board for the creation journey. Yeah, and also whenever you have 5 people that you're working with, it's much harder for things to be lost in translation. Correct. Because there are a few people that are translating. So now whenever you have all these people constantly talking and doing all this stuff, it's hard to really have a consistent universal message. And
it's spot on. This is actually my job. My job is to help teams that are of any scale create a succinct vision of where we're trying to go, and then get everybody to collaborate well and focus toward that in a healthy cultural environment. Like, this is the job of leaders. You take care of the culture, you take care of the product vision, you take care of the process as a way to serve those things. And unfortunately, many people get that backwards, and they focus too much on the process, or they focus on everybody just being busy all the time, and they hire a ton of people and they make sure they're busy all the time, and they have all these different layers to their org, and they're all trying to direct and do things, and we've lost that. Even at large scales, you can pull off this idea of like, let's all align to the same goal, but it is really, really, really hard, and it is something that only comes with scale. And indies and solo devs, they don't have to worry about that problem. They've got their own set of problems, like the overwhelmingly likely thing is that they're going to make a game and no one's going to play it. That's what they have to worry about. So credit to those that make it. Credit those that don't. Like, good experience, good learning. We're all in it together, trying to make stuff players love.
It's hard to really have a consistent, universal message. And I think that's the big difference, too.
All right. Closing thoughts. Yeah, I mean, I think I said everything in there that I kind of wanted to say. don't buy the war. The war is a thing that's out there. Maybe players have a preference for indie games versus AAA. If you guys want to create factions and start fighting about it, I guess, if you want to. For those of us in game dev, while, yeah, there can be some elitism in various spaces, like, or, you know, well, oh, you don't know about, like, oh, well, you come from this background. Oh, you come from console, you don't know PC, or you come from VR. Oh, you can't, well, how could you help us in mobile? Like, there can be absolutely some elitism and factioning between platforms or sizes or all this different stuff. Sure, absolutely. But broadly, like, in game dev, we're all in it together. There's not a war. I've rarely seen, can I think of a time where I've seen like AAA studio that when they saw an indie get really big, they were all like, oh no, they're stealing our play. Like, not really. And I think the same should be true for indies. You shouldn't look at the AAA people and be like, oh, they're stealing all my players. Like, no, it's not how this works. I mean, in some sense it is, because there's a zero-sum game that's being played for player attention, but it's just not that direct. There's too many variables involved. So, yeah, there's not a war going on. Making games is very hard. There are two huge problems you have to solve. You have to make something that is an emotionally engaging experience, an emotionally engaging experience for players, so that they want to keep doing it. Like, same thing movies are trying to do, or music, or anything, any sort of entertainment, trying to make something that is an emotional hook for somebody that will help them continue to play that thing and find it worthwhile to continue to engage with the thing. That's very difficult. And then you also have the problem of getting anybody to even know you exist. That's very difficult. And it's very difficult across the board. It obviously different scales, different constraints on these different systems, different player expectations, different success criteria, budgets, team sizes, challenges with those team sizes. You know, I talked about that bureaucracy and how difficult that can make it for AAA, but the indie or the 5-person team, they don't have a bunch of skills that would be very useful to have, and so they do their best with what they have. And, you know, or they have to spend a lot of money to try to hire contractors or external agencies to try to solve the problems that they don't know how to solve, where a AAA studio just has a group of people that know how to do that in the context of game development. Like, these are different problems, they're different challenges, but we all share those two basic ones. Can I make a game that is an emotionally engaging experience that players are just going to enjoy? Call it fun, call it whatever you want. I like the idea of, like, you know, can you make a compelling game? And then number two, can you get anybody to know it exists? And specifically, can you get the players who you think or who will like it in front of it? Because that's another thing that can happen, is you can do a great job of marketing and you market to the wrong group of people. Very long React video. This is the only kind I do. Yeah, hope this has been helpful in terms of thinking through this. So, till next time, cheers.